The sun of Veyrath glowed faintly over the floating palace, casting pale gold light across the high, translucent walls. Inside, the air shimmered with a faint hum of psychic energy. And the throne room was quiet, except for the soft footsteps of Queen Thalira. She moved slowly, her multiple eyes reflecting a mixture of worry and sorrow. Today was the day she had dreaded for years. The council would gather to discuss the future of her daughter, Princess Lyra. Lyra had always been different. From the moment she hatched, she failed to display the strength and psychic clarity expected of a Veyrathian. While other younglings could project their thoughts across great distances or manipulate objects with mental energy, Lyra struggled with even the simplest tasks. Her powers were inconsistent, weak, and unpredictable. In a society where ability defined value, her differences marked her as vulnerable, and vulnerability was dangerous. The palace halls were filled with advisors and elders, all dressed in the traditional ceremonial robes, their wings folded neatly behind them. Whispers floated through the air, telepathic murmurs that prickled at the edges of Thalira's mind. Some whispered sympathy, others judgment. Many hoped the council would decide that Lyra was unfit to lead or even to marry, thus freeing the queen from the burden of shame. But Thalira could not bring herself to agree. Her daughter was her heart, and she refused to abandon her, no matter the cost. As the council settled into their seats, Thalira took her place on the throne, her antennae twitching slightly. "My council," she began, her voice echoing in the large hall. "We are gathered today to discuss the future of my daughter, Princess Lyra." The words felt heavy in her mouth. She hated the formal tone, hated that tradition demanded this moment. But there was no other way. The eldest counselor, a stern and sharp-minded figure named Vathar, spoke first. "Your Majesty, it is no secret that Princess Lyra is different. She lacks the control necessary to wield her powers effectively. Our society cannot allow weakness to persist in the royal line. It is a matter of survival." Thalira's many eyes scanned the council. There was judgment in every gaze, though a few hid a flicker of sympathy. She knew the truth. Lyra was fragile in their ways, but she had strength in other ways. She had a sharp mind, a kind heart, and a curiosity that exceeded even the most gifted Veyrathians. These were qualities the council could not see, trapped as they were in their tradition of power. "She is still my daughter," Thalira replied calmly, though her voice carried a tremor beneath the surface. "I will not allow her to be judged solely by what she cannot do. There are other ways to measure strength: intelligence, wisdom, empathy. They are also gifts. Can we not consider them?" The council murmured, but no one spoke for a moment. Thalira's words challenged centuries of tradition. To many, they seemed almost reckless. Vathar's mandibles clicked with disapproval. "Queen Thalira," he said carefully, "we respect your maternal instincts, but we cannot ignore the reality of our society. The princess's lack of psychic power is a threat to her own safety and to the future of Veyrath. If she cannot find a suitable mate who can guide her, she may bring dishonor to the throne." At that, Thalira felt a surge of protective anger. "Lyra is more than her powers," she said firmly. "She is clever, compassionate, and courageous. You cannot measure a being's worth by a single gift alone." A younger counselor, whose name was Mivra, whispered in agreement, but her voice was lost in the echoing room. Thalira could see the tension mounting. The council was split. Some feared breaking tradition, some feared for the princess, and a few dared to hope that change was possible. Meanwhile, on a distant blue planet called Earth, a human named Dr. Elias Wren was working late in his laboratory. He specialized in interstellar communication and had recently intercepted a series of unusual messages from Veyrath. The psychic signals were unlike anything he had studied before, intense, emotional, and yet tinged with fear. As he decoded them, he realized they were not just formal transmissions but pleas, personal cries for understanding. One message caught his attention in particular. The words, though alien, conveyed desperation. "No one wants my daughter." Elias felt a shiver run down his spine. Something about it spoke to the human part of him. The desire to help, the instinct to act when someone is in need. Without hesitation, he made a decision. He would travel to Veyrath. He knew it was dangerous. The Veyrathians were a proud and secretive race, and humans were rare visitors. But the thought of a young being in distress, rejected by her own kind, pushed him forward. He prepared his ship, packed supplies, and set coordinates for the alien planet. His heart raced not with fear, but with purpose. Back in the palace, Lyra sat alone in the gardens, a place where glowing plants and floating flowers swayed in the gentle psychic currents. She had always loved the gardens. They were her escape, a place where she could think without judgment. Today, however, even the beauty of the flowers could not ease the knot in her chest. She had overheard some of the council's discussions. She knew what they were thinking. Weak, unfit, undeserving. She felt small and unworthy, though she tried to hide it. Her mother's eyes often found her, and she saw the worry and the hope mirrored there. Lyra traced her fingers along a shimmering leaf, watching it pulse with a soft light. "Why can't I be like the others?" she whispered to herself. She hated that she felt afraid. She hated that she wanted to hide. And yet, somewhere deep inside, a flicker of determination remained. She did not want to be broken. She wanted to find her place, even if the world seemed set against her. The palace doors opened suddenly, and a low hum echoed across the gardens. Lyra stepped forward, her presence commanding attention even among the glowing flora. "Lyra," she said softly, her voice carrying both authority and warmth. "You are not weak. You have gifts that the council cannot see. You have courage, intelligence, and heart. That is more than many can claim." Lyra looked up, her many eyes reflecting a mixture of fear and hope. "But mother, I am not strong enough. I cannot control my powers. I cannot do what is expected of me." The queen knelt, lowering herself to her daughter's level. "Strength is not always measured in power, my child. Sometimes it is measured in the choices we make, the lives we touch, and the courage to stand when the world doubts us." She paused, letting the words settle. "I will not give up on you. There is a way forward, and we will find it together." As Lyra spoke, far above the Veyrathian skies, a small human ship breached the planet's atmosphere. Elias Wren piloted with care, marveling at the vast floating structures below. The palace was more magnificent than he had imagined, a testament to a civilization that valued order, intellect, and tradition. Yet he felt the tension from afar, the unease in the psychic signals, the silent cries of a young princess who did not belong. He landed on a platform near the palace gardens, ensuring that his arrival would not startle the inhabitants. The ship's doors opened, and Elias stepped out, taking a deep breath of the alien air. It was rich with energy, and he could feel faint pulses of emotion around him. Curiosity, fear, hope, and then, strongest of all, he felt a thread of sadness and uncertainty. Lyra's presence, Lyra noticed him immediately. Her antennae twitched with curiosity and caution. Who was this human? And why had he come? The council would not approve, she knew. But something in her heart told her that perhaps this outsider might bring a solution her own people could not see. She beckoned him forward. Cautious, but open, Elias approached slowly, his hands raised in a gesture of peace. "Queen Lyra," he said carefully, "I received your messages. I know you are in distress about your daughter. I want to help, if you will allow me." The room went silent. A human, stepping forward on Veyrath, offering aid to the royal family, such a thing, was unheard of. The council shifted uneasily, but Lyra's gaze remained steady. She could sense Elias's sincerity, his intelligence, and the strange kind of strength that did not rely on psychic power. "You are brave to come here," she said. "Many would see only the difference between our worlds, not the possibilities. Perhaps you can see what we have been blind to." Lyra watched from the garden, a mixture of fear and excitement in her eyes. This human, might be the first person outside her family to see her for who she truly was, not for what she lacked. She felt a flicker of hope, fragile but real, ignite in her heart. The council murmured again, some skeptical, others intrigued. Thalira stood, regal and commanding. "Let him speak," she declared. "We will listen. For the sake of my daughter, we will see if there is a way forward beyond our traditions." Elias nodded, grateful for the trust placed in him. He glanced at Lyra, who met his gaze with a tentative smile. "Princess Lyra," he said gently, "I cannot promise you that everything will be easy, but I can promise that you will learn to see your own strength, and perhaps, together, we can find a path where you are not defined by what you cannot do, but by what you can achieve." The princess's eyes widened, a spark of determination beginning to grow where there had only been doubt. Thalira felt a wave of relief, hope, and pride. The journey ahead would be difficult, full of challenges and obstacles, but for the first time, she believed her daughter might find her place not in the shadows of tradition, but in the light of her own potential. And so, as the twin suns of Veyrath dipped below the horizon, casting long shadows over the palace, a new chapter began. A human had stepped forward where no one else had dared. A princess had found a glimmer of hope, and a queen, once filled with fear and sorrow, dared to dream that her daughter's future might yet be bright. The first step had been taken, but the path ahead was uncertain. There would be trials, there would be opposition, and the council's judgment would still weigh heavily. Yet, for the first time, Lyra did not feel alone, and for the first time, she allowed herself to believe that she might have a future worth fighting for. The morning light on Veyrath spread across the palace gardens like molten gold, reflecting off the floating flowers and crystal vines. Lyra stood at the edge of a glimmering pond, her reflection rippling with the gentle currents. Elias had stayed the night in the palace, accommodated as a special guest, though the council's suspicion was clear in the sharp glances they threw him. Lyra's mother, Queen Thalira, had gone early to meet with the council, leaving Lyra and Elias alone. "Good morning," Elias said gently, approaching her with careful steps. He held a small device in his hand, something Lyra had never seen before. It hummed softly, almost like it was alive. "Are you ready to start?" Lyra shook her head slightly. "I don't know if I can do this," she whispered. I've always failed. Every test, every expectation. I can't even control my powers properly. How could I possibly learn anything useful from a human?" Elias knelt beside her, the device in his hand glowing softly. "Strength isn't always about what you can control or what powers you have. It's about understanding, thinking ahead, and finding solutions where others see problems. You already have those gifts, Lyra. You just haven't realized it yet." Lyra looked down at the water, her reflection fragmented by the ripples. "I don't feel like a leader. I feel small." "Being small doesn't mean you are weak," Elias said firmly. "Sometimes, being small allows you to see things others overlook. It allows you to move quietly, think carefully, and act wisely." Lyra glanced at him, a flicker of curiosity in her eyes. "Then, what do we do first?" Elias smiled. "We start with observation." He held the device closer to the pond, and a soft light spread across the surface, projecting faint images in the air above. "I want you to notice everything around you, the plants, the creatures, the flow of the water. Tell me what you see that might be important, even if it seems small or unimportant." Lyra frowned, concentrating. Slowly, she began to notice patterns, the way the water rippled differently near certain flowers, how some vines moved almost as if they had a rhythm, and how small insects worked together to carry pollen. "The smaller things, they're connected," she murmured. "They all affect each other, even if it's tiny." "Exactly," Elias said, eyes bright. "Understanding connections is the first step to leadership. You are noticing patterns that others would ignore. And that is powerful." For the next several hours, they moved through the gardens. Elias set small challenges for her, finding paths through a maze of floating vines, identifying safe ways across unstable platforms, and observing how different plants reacted to changes in light or psychic energy. Each time, Lyra succeeded in her own way, not through force, but through careful thought and attention. By midday, her confidence had grown slightly. She began to feel a strange sense of pride. "I never realized I could notice so much," she said. "I always thought power was everything, but maybe there are other ways to be strong." Elias nodded. "There are many kinds of strength. Physical strength, psychic strength, and then there is mental strength. That is often the most important, especially for someone who wants to lead." Just as they were taking a break, a loud chime echoed through the gardens. It was Queen Thalira, her presence calm but commanding. "Lyra," she said, her multiple eyes softening as they landed on her daughter. "How are you feeling?" Lyra hesitated. "Better, Mother. I think I understand a little more now. Elias says I have strengths I didn't notice." Thalira smiled, antennae twitching in approval. "I've always known it, my child. Now you must see it too. The council may not understand yet, but you will have to prove it to them." Lyra's stomach twisted. "Prove it? But how?" "They will test me. And I might fail." Thalira placed a comforting hand on her daughter's shoulder. "Strength is not only what you can do, Lyra. It is also how you respond when others doubt you. Trust in what you have learned, and trust in yourself." The following days were filled with rigorous training. Elias taught Lyra human methods of problem-solving, breaking complex challenges into smaller parts, predicting outcomes, and thinking creatively. They practiced teamwork exercises, even involving palace attendants and some of the less powerful young Veyrathians. Lyra discovered she was good at organizing and inspiring others, finding solutions that required cooperation rather than raw psychic ability. One afternoon, as the pale twin suns of Veyrath began to dip, Lyra stumbled upon an old, hidden chamber in the palace. It was filled with ancient texts and carvings, many older than even the queen herself remembered. As she traced her fingers along the symbols, a small, glowing projection flickered to life. It displayed a prophecy. When a leader rises without the might of power, yet with the clarity of mind and the compassion of heart, the fate of Veyrath shall change. The one who unites the overlooked shall lead the future into light. Lyra's eyes widened. Could this be about her? She felt a mixture of awe and fear. "Elias, look at this. Do you think could it be about me?" Elias studied the projection carefully. "It certainly seems to describe someone who uses intellect and empathy instead of traditional power. That matches everything I've seen in you, Lyra. You are capable of this. You just need to believe it." Lyra sat down, overwhelmed by the thought. For so long, she had felt inadequate. Now, for the first time, there was a glimmer of purpose, a sense that she could matter beyond the council's judgment. In the following weeks, the council remained skeptical of Elias and his influence. Some openly mocked his human methods. "A human cannot understand our ways," one counselor sneered. "And yet the queen allows him to instruct the princess?" But Queen Thalira stood firm. "Do not underestimate the value of new ideas," she said sharply. "We must consider all possibilities if we are to survive and prosper." Lyra continued her training, and slowly, others began to notice her growth. She solved complex strategic problems that had stumped even experienced Veyrathians. She displayed patience and empathy when negotiating disputes among palace staff. Small victories built her confidence, and even the council could not ignore the subtle shift in her presence. One evening, Elias and Lyra walked along the edge of the palace's floating terraces. The twin moons had risen, casting a gentle silver glow over the gardens. "Do you see, Lyra?" Elias asked quietly. "Every challenge you've faced has been teaching you more than any raw power ever could. You are learning to lead not by dominating, but by understanding." Lyra looked down at the flowing terraces, her mind turning over the lessons. "I think I'm beginning to see it. Power isn't everything. What matters is how you use what you have, how you see the world differently from everyone else. Elias smiled. Exactly. And that difference, that is what will make you strong. The next day brought a challenge Lyra had not expected. The council arranged a demonstration of psychic skill in front of the queen. Other young Varathians performed effortlessly, bending objects, projecting thoughts, and demonstrating their strength. Lyra stepped forward, feeling the eyes of dozens of observers upon her. For a moment, she froze, doubting herself. But then she remembered Elias's words, the prophecy, and her own small victories. Instead of trying to imitate the others, she approached the challenge differently. She analyzed the task, predicted potential outcomes, and used clever tools to aid her movements. While her psychic power was weak, her planning allowed her to succeed where raw strength alone might have failed. Gasps of surprise echoed through the chamber. The council's skepticism wavered. Even those who had doubted her began to whisper among themselves. Queen Thalira's eyes glistened with pride. She had always believed in her daughter. But seeing Lyra stand tall and succeed in her own way brought a joy she had not felt in years. Lyra returned to Elias, her face glowing with relief. I did it, she whispered. You did more than that, Elias replied. You proved something important. That being different does not mean being weak. That leadership comes in many forms. And the courage to try is as powerful as any psychic skill. Over the following weeks, Lyra's confidence grew. She began to engage more openly with her peers, offering advice, solving disputes, and organizing activities that improved the palace's efficiency. The council continued to watch closely, sometimes critically, but increasingly with respect. One afternoon, a young Varathian approached her in the garden. Princess Lyra, he said nervously, I wanted to thank you. Your ideas helped us solve a problem we've struggled with for months. You really are different. In a good way. Lyra smiled softly, realizing that her difference was not a weakness at all. It was her greatest strength. With Elias's guidance and her own growing understanding, she began to see that she could navigate her world in ways no one else could. That evening, as the sun set and the sky filled with the faint glimmer of distant stars, Lyra stood at the edge of the palace garden, looking out across the floating terraces. She felt a sense of calm she had never known. The fear of failure, the shame of weakness, the pressure of expectation, all of it had not disappeared. But it had changed. She understood that her path was different, yes. But that difference was not a limitation. It was an advantage. Elias stood beside her quietly, his human presence comforting in its steadiness. You are ready for the next step, Lyra, he said softly. The council's trials will be difficult. But you have already learned the most important lesson. You can succeed by being yourself, not by being like everyone else. Lyra turned to him, determination shining in her eyes. Then I am ready, she said firmly. I will face whatever comes. I will not be afraid to show who I am. And so, as the palace lights flickered on and the twin moons rose higher into the sky, a new chapter of Lyra's journey began. The princess who had once been afraid, the princess whom no one wanted, was now learning to see her own value. She was discovering that strength came in many forms, and that sometimes, the bravest act was simply to believe in oneself. The council would soon witness her true potential. The trials were coming. But for the first time, Lyra knew she was not alone. She had guidance, she had courage, and she had a human who had stepped forward when no one else dared. Together, they would face the challenges ahead and perhaps change the future of Veyrath forever. The day of the council's trial arrived with an air of tension that made even the floating palace seem heavier than usual. Lyra stood in her ceremonial robes, feeling the hum of energy in the walls and the watchful eyes of the council upon her. The other young Varathians prepared in a nearby chamber, confident, their psychic powers crackling in visible currents. Many of them smirked at her quietly, believing that her weakness would be exposed today. Elias stood at her side, calm and steady. Remember, Lyra, he said softly. This is not about matching them in strength. It's about thinking differently, seeing what others overlook, and using your mind and heart to guide your actions. Lyra nodded, taking a deep breath. She could feel the nervous energy within her, but for the first time, it did not paralyze her. She had trained for weeks, learned the patterns of observation, practiced the art of strategy, and discovered the value of empathy and teamwork. Today, she would put all of that to the test. The chamber opened, a cathedral-like space with walls of crystal that glowed with soft light. The council was seated high above, their multiple eyes scanning the room with intensity. The floor was marked with a series of challenge zones, each designed to test a different skill: telepathic control, precision, problem-solving, and leadership. A low hum of energy vibrated through the room as each challenge activated. The first test was psychic control. Other participants lifted objects, bent them, and moved them effortlessly. Lyra stepped forward, knowing her powers were weak. Instead of trying to lift the largest objects like everyone else, she observed the patterns of the energy field. She noticed a small, overlooked lever at the edge of the zone. Carefully, she moved it, triggering a mechanism that caused the objects to move gently, aligning perfectly as if by magic. Gasps echoed through the chamber. She had succeeded not through strength, but through clever observation. Next came the puzzle challenge. A complex array of glowing symbols and shifting platforms awaited each participant. Others relied on raw psychic skill to manipulate the symbols, struggling when the patterns became unpredictable. Lyra paused, recalling Elias's lessons. Break the problem into smaller parts, predict outcomes, and observe how each element interacts. Slowly, methodically, she began to rearrange the symbols, testing each move carefully. When the last piece clicked into place, the chamber's energy surged in approval. Once again, she had triumphed, not by power, but by careful reasoning. As she moved to the next challenge, she noticed whispers among the council. Some were incredulous, unable to believe that a princess with such weak powers could succeed. Others leaned forward, curiosity lighting their many eyes. Lyra felt a spark of pride but quickly pushed it aside. There were more trials to face, and each demanded her full attention. The final challenge was the most daunting, a leadership trial. A simulated crisis was projected in the chamber, a dangerous energy storm approaching a Veyrathian colony. Participants were expected to coordinate the defense using their psychic power and knowledge of tactics. The others attempted to control the situation with force, directing energy and manipulating barriers directly. Lyra hesitated, knowing she could not compete in raw psychic might. Instead, she drew on her training. She assessed the situation, observed the behavior of the storm, and noted the strengths and weaknesses of her available forces. She organized small groups of assistants and minor young Veyrathians, instructing them clearly and calmly. Some were skeptical, but her confidence inspired trust. Using timing, positioning, and strategy rather than sheer force, she coordinated the defense. The storm hit, massive and unpredictable. Yet Lyra's plan held. Forces moved in harmony. Gaps were filled before they became critical, and damage was minimized. Slowly, the chamber projected the results: success. The council could not ignore it. Even the most critical elders leaned forward, eyes wide, mandibles clicking in surprise. But her triumph was not without challenge. A few of the other young Veyrathians, unwilling to accept defeat, attempted to sabotage her efforts. One redirected energy in a dangerous way, threatening to destabilize the defense. Lyra acted quickly. Noticing the interference before anyone else, she calmly gave new instructions, rerouting energy and coordinating her team to counteract the threat. Her empathy allowed her to understand the motives of those around her, predicting their actions and using them to strengthen her own plan. By the time the trial concluded, the council was silent. Lyra's performance had not only succeeded in each individual test, but had shown something entirely new. A method of leadership that relied on understanding, observation, and strategy, rather than brute psychic power. Queen Thalira watched her daughter with tears glimmering in her eyes. The pride she felt was overwhelming. For years, she had worried that Lyra would be cast aside, that her weakness would define her life. Now, standing before the council, Lyra was more than her powers. She was intelligence, courage, and empathy personified. Elias approached her quietly. "You see? Strength isn't always about raw power. You've led them in a way no one expected." Lyra nodded, her eyes shining. I didn't know I could do it. I didn't think anyone could succeed here without the powers they all have." "That is exactly why you succeeded," Elias said. "You didn't try to be them. You were yourself." For a moment, silence filled the chamber. Then Vathar, the eldest counselor, cleared his throat. "Princess Lyra," he said slowly, his voice heavy with surprise. "What you have demonstrated is unconventional, yet undeniably effective. Your methods, your thinking have achieved results that pure strength could not." The council must reconsider its judgments. Murmurs of agreement followed. Some counselors still looked skeptical, but doubt had begun to shift into recognition. Lyra felt a flicker of hope. Perhaps the path ahead was opening for her after all. The queen stepped forward, her voice strong. "This is the way forward," she declared. "We cannot ignore the evidence. Lyra has shown a new form of leadership, one that could change the future of our people." Lyra felt the weight of those words settle on her shoulders. She had proven herself in ways she never thought possible. Yet deep inside, she knew the journey was not over. This trial had been a test. But the real challenges, real threats to Veyrath still lay ahead. Just as the council began to discuss her results, an urgent alert rang through the palace. Red lights flashed across the walls, signaling an approaching fleet. The psychic sensors confirmed it. A predatory alien fleet was moving toward Veyrath, hostile and prepared for destruction. Panic rippled through the chamber. Many Veyrathians reacted with instinctive fear, calling for defensive action based solely on power. Lyra felt a familiar knot of fear rise within her chest. This was the real test, the trial she could not predict. Elias placed a hand on her shoulder. "You've faced challenges before, Lyra. You know how to think ahead. Don't panic. Observe, strategize, and act." Lyra took a deep breath and stepped forward. She accessed the palace's control interface, assessing the approaching fleet and the available defenses. The enemy's pattern was predictable in some ways, chaotic in others. She began organizing the palace forces, deploying smaller units to intercept attacks while positioning the psychic barriers strategically. Using lessons from Elias, she coordinated with marginalized groups, young Veyrathians, who had been ignored because of their weaker powers. They followed her guidance without question, their energy amplified by confidence in her leadership. Slowly, the initial chaos became a controlled defense. The enemy fleet struck, expecting easy victory. Lyra's strategy surprised them. Forces moved in unexpected formations, energy channels redirected attacks, and weak points were exploited not through psychic might but through planning. The invaders faltered, unsure how a planet they believed defenseless could respond so effectively. The council watched in awe. Even those most critical of Lyra's unconventional methods could not deny the results. She was leading a successful defense, her mind sharper than any raw power alone could achieve. Hours passed, but Lyra's calm focus never wavered. She anticipated enemy moves, adjusted her strategy, and relied on her team's strengths. The fleet, frustrated and damaged, finally retreated, leaving Veyrath safe. Silence fell over the chamber. The council members were speechless. Lyra's unconventional methods had not only succeeded, they had saved the planet. Queen Thalyra stepped forward, tears flowing freely. "My daughter," she said, voice thick with emotion. "You have done what no one believed possible. You have shown that courage, intelligence, and heart are as powerful as any psychic skill." Lyra turned to Elias, her eyes filled with gratitude. We did it together," she whispered. Elias smiled, nodding. "Yes, And this is only the beginning. The world may doubt you. The council may resist. But you have proven that a new way is possible. The council slowly began to speak, acknowledging her success and the effectiveness of her leadership. Some remained skeptical, but many were inspired. Lyra had changed the perception of what a leader could be. She had bridged the gap between tradition and innovation, showing that empathy, intelligence, and courage were forces no one could ignore. As the sun set over Veyrath, casting long shadows across the palace, Lyra stood tall. She had faced doubt, challenge, and real danger, and emerged victorious. For the first time, she truly believed in herself. She was no longer the princess whom no one wanted. She was a leader in her own right, ready to face whatever the future might bring. And somewhere in the quiet of the palace gardens, a human who had stepped forward when no one else would, watched with quiet pride. Together, they had begun to change the future of an entire civilization. The night sky over Veyrath was alive with movement. Alien warships, sleek and dark, approached in formation, their engines glowing a cold blue. The planet had survived the earlier attack, but the threat had not disappeared. Lyra stood on the balcony of the floating palace, her eyes fixed on the approaching fleet. Beside her, Elias remained calm, observing the sensors and the flow of energy through the city. "This is different," Elias said quietly. "The first fleet was an attack. But this is a full-scale invasion. They will not stop until they take Veyrath. You will have to lead not only your people, but also everyone who trusts you in this fight." Lyra felt a shiver of fear, but it was mingled with determination. "I can do it," she said firmly. "But not like they expect. Not with power alone. I will have to use what I've learned. Everything Elias has taught me." The palace command room was alive with energy as Veyrathian soldiers prepared for defense. Forces were marshaled, psychic shields were raised, and communication channels buzzed with anxious voices. The council was present, though many were still skeptical of Lyra's unconventional methods. Some whispered that relying on strategy and observation instead of sheer psychic might was foolish. Lyra ignored them. She had prepared for this moment. Drawing on her observations and the lessons from Elias, she divided the forces into groups based on their abilities, not their power rankings. She paired weaker Veyrathians with stronger ones, in ways that maximized efficiency. She instructed teams to focus on coordination and timing, using small, controlled bursts of energy to guide the defense. The alien fleet struck first, unleashing waves of destructive beams aimed at the floating city and its energy shields. The palace trembled under the assault. But Lyra's plan worked. She had anticipated the attack patterns, directing defenses to intercept with precision. Some ships were destroyed before they could cause serious damage, while others were funneled into traps where their energy attacks canceled each other out. Elias watched with admiration. "You are thinking like a general, Lyra. Not just a princess. This is how humans win battles. By predicting and outsmarting. Not by overpowering." Lyra felt the weight of responsibility heavy on her shoulders. But she did not waver. She moved quickly from station to station, giving instructions, adjusting strategies, and keeping morale high. The young Veyrathians, inspired by her calm and thoughtful leadership, followed her directions with precision. Even those who had doubted her before began to trust her judgment. Hours passed, and the battle intensified. The alien fleet adapted, changing formation and attacking from unexpected angles. Lyra adjusted as quickly as she could, but the strain was evident. She felt exhaustion creeping in, but Elias reminded her to breathe and focus on the next steps, not the fear. Suddenly, a large warship broke through the outer defenses, heading straight for the palace. Panic spread among the defenders. The council shouted orders, relying on brute force to repel the ship, but their efforts were not enough. Lyra's mind raced. She could not match the ship with psychic power alone, but she could think strategically. "Listen carefully," she called, her voice amplified through the palace channels. "Do not attack it directly. Use the surrounding ships to guide it into the energy field we set up near the northern ridge. Concentrate the shields to create a corridor. If we control its path, we can neutralize it without risking our strongest warriors." The soldiers hesitated, uncertain, but the younger Veyrathians who had been overlooked before followed her instructions. Step by step, Lyra's plan unfolded. The ship moved exactly as she predicted, caught in a corridor of controlled energy that drained its power and finally immobilized it. A cheer erupted from the command room. Queen Thalyra watched with tears in her eyes. "My daughter," she whispered to Elias. "She has become the leader I always hoped she could be." Lyra felt a rush of pride but did not allow herself to pause. The fleet was still large, and more attacks were coming. She quickly moved to the next phase of her strategy. Using the palace's sensors, she identified weak points in the enemy formation. She instructed smaller, faster ships to harass these points, creating confusion and forcing the invaders into defensive positions. At the same time, she coordinated the psychic energy of her people, not to fight directly, but to strengthen barriers and protect civilians. Each action was carefully timed and placed, a complex puzzle that she solved in real time. The invaders had expected a simple, brute force defense. They were now facing a mind they could not predict. Elias observed silently, amazed at her composure. "You're not just defending," he said quietly. "You're controlling the battlefield, guiding it like a river. This is strategy at its finest." Lyra glanced at him, her eyes firm. "I learned from the humans," she said. "They taught me to see what others miss, to use everything around me, not just rely on power." The battle reached its climax when the remaining alien fleet gathered for a concentrated assault on the palace's central energy core. It was the heart of Veyrath's defenses, and if it fell, the city would be destroyed. The council panicked, shouting orders. But Lyra remained calm. She had anticipated this move. "Divide the forces," she commanded. "We will create multiple layers of defense, draw them apart, weaken them, and then concentrate our strength where it counts. Follow my lead, and trust your instincts." Her teams moved swiftly, obeying her instructions perfectly. Some engaged directly, while others reinforced shields and rerouted energy flows. The alien fleet was divided and disoriented, unable to coordinate as Lyra had predicted. Step by step, their attack faltered. The palace defenses absorbed the remaining energy beams, and the invaders, frustrated and damaged, began to retreat. Silence fell over the palace once the last enemy ship had gone. The council members, usually so stern and critical, were speechless. Lyra's strategies had not only saved the palace and the city, but had also demonstrated a new form of leadership. One that combined intellect, empathy, and courage. Queen Thalyra approached her daughter, tears shining in her many eyes. "Lyra," she said softly, "you have done what no one believed possible. You have led with your mind and your heart. And in doing so, you have saved our people. You are more than the princess I worried about. You are the leader Veyrath needs." Lyra turned to Elias, who stood quietly, his presence calm and reassuring. "We did it together," she said, her voice strong but filled with gratitude. "I couldn't have done it alone." Elias smiled. "You did most of it. I only helped you see what was already inside you." The council, now gathered fully, began to speak. Vathar, the eldest and most skeptical, stepped forward. "Princess Lyra," he said slowly, "your actions today have proven that strength is not only measured in psychic power. You have shown intelligence, courage, and the ability to lead in ways we had not considered. The council recognizes your skill, and we must reconsider our traditions in light of what you have accomplished." Other councillors nodded, some reluctantly, some with admiration. The young Veyrathians who had once doubted her now approached to offer respect. Lyra felt a warmth in her chest. She had faced fear, challenge, and opposition, and she had prevailed not through what she lacked, but through what she had learned to use wisely. That evening, the palace was filled with celebration. The citizens of Veyrath, aware of the defense and the intelligence behind it, hailed the princess as a hero. For Lyra, the celebration was bittersweet. She had succeeded, but she knew that leadership was not just about victory in battle. It was about guiding her people, protecting the weak, and making choices that would shape the future. Elias stayed by her side, quietly observing the festivities. "This is only the beginning," he said softly. "You have proven yourself, but the future will hold new challenges. What matters is that you know your strength and trust your judgment." Lyra looked out over the city, her eyes reflecting the light of the twin moons. She thought of the prophecy she had discovered weeks ago, the one that spoke of a leader who would rise without the might of power, yet with clarity of mind and compassion of heart. She realized that the prophecy was not just words, it was a vision of what she could be. The queen approached her, placing a gentle hand on her shoulder. "No one wanted my daughter," she said softly, her voice trembling with emotion. "But now, you have shown that your worth was never in question. You were always capable of greatness." Lyra smiled, feeling a sense of peace she had never known. "Thank you, Mother. I will do my best to guide our people and honor what you have taught me." The night stretched on, filled with quiet celebration and reflection. Lyra walked through the gardens, Elias by her side, contemplating everything that had happened. She realized that her journey was far from over. There would always be challenges, both from within and beyond Veyrath, but she now understood the power she possessed. Not the power to control, but the power to think, to lead, and to inspire. In that moment, Lyra knew that she had not only found her place, but had also begun to change the world around her. The princess who had once been overlooked, feared, and dismissed had become a symbol of hope, proving that true strength came in many forms. Humanity had stepped forward, guiding her. But it was she who had embraced the challenge, transforming fear into courage, doubt into strategy, and weakness into leadership. As dawn broke over the floating city, the twin suns casting light over the palace and gardens, Lyra stood tall, ready to face whatever came next. The enemy fleet had been repelled. The council had begun to understand a new way of leadership, and the people of Veyrath had hope for the first time in generations. The future was uncertain, but one thing was clear. With courage, intellect, and heart, anything was possible. And somewhere nearby, Elias watched her with quiet pride, knowing that a human had helped a civilization see a truth they had long ignored. Lyra, the princess who no one wanted, had become the leader Veyrath needed, and together, they had shown that the combination of human wisdom and Veyrathian courage could shape a future brighter than anyone had imagined.